Hey, you're in the library with the library prof, and we're continuing our deep dive into critical thinking and thinking about critical thinking in relation to logical possibility. And we're going to do that in light of Sherlock Holmes, Alexander Pope, Emily Dickinson, and Aristotle. And so logical possibility plays a large implicit role in detective fiction, as when Sherlock Holmes says the following to his partner in the 1939 version of the Hounds of the Baskervilles. He says this: "That's where crimes are conceived and they are solved, in the imagination." Now, if we use our imaginations as the criminal does, imagine what might have happened to the murder victim and act upon it, investigate it, based on our theory. As I have been trying to do in this case, we usually find ourselves justified. Now that's the quote. In other words, Holmes is suggesting that to solve a crime, one moves from the logically possible to a plausible theory, and then one brings close attention to subsequent experience and experiment, either confirming or disconfirming the theory. Ultimately, the most probable theory of those on offer is the one in which we usually find ourselves justified, though of course not always. As with crime solving, so with truth seeking in general. Thus, it seems that the human condition is to strive to reason even as we often fail in reason. So it is that we dwell in uncertainties as best we can. As the poet Alexander Pope, who lived 1688 to 1744, observes of the individual, he wrote this: "Placed on this isthmus of a middle state, a being darkly wise and rudely great, with too much knowledge for the skeptic's side, with too much weakness for the stoic's pride. He hangs between, in doubt to act or rest, in doubt his mind or body to prefer, born but to die, and reasoning but to err, alike in ignorance his reasoning such, whether he thinks too little or too much, chaos of thought and passion, all confused, still by himself abused or disabused, created half to rise and half to fall, great Lord of all things, yet a prey to all, sole judge of truth, in endless error hurled, the glory, jest, and riddle of the world." But if dwelling in uncertainty in the prosaic, the workaday material, factual world, struggling with one's uncertainties in relation to truth and what one should do is too much for us, there is always life beyond this world, the life of the imaginative artist or poet, who makes a space, at least for a time, to escape such questions and dwells in possibility. As when Emily Dickinson writes the following: "I dwell in possibility, a fairer house than prose, more numerous of windows, superior for doors, of chambers as the cedars, impregnable of eye, and for an everlasting roof the gambrels of the sky. Of visitors the fairest, for occupation this, the spreading wide my narrow hands, to gather paradise." Dickinson's preference for imaginative possibility over one's workaday, matter-of-fact world of prose is akin to the distinction the philosopher Aristotle in his Poetics makes between history and poetry. Here's Aristotle. The true difference between history and poetry is that one relates what has happened, the other what may happen. Poetry tends to express the universal history, the universal, history the particular. By the universal, I mean how a person of a certain type will on occasion speak or act according to the law of probability or necessity. That was the quote of Aristotle. Now, in other words, while the historian's imagination is constrained by particular historical facts, the poet's imagination suffers no such constraint. And yet the poet is still constrained by what is either logically possible, logically necessary, that is, the rules of logic and non-contradiction, no married bachelors, etc., or the psychologically and sociologically plausible. Even the poet's imagination is not wholly unconstrained, in other words. So I hope this was helpful to you as far as thinking about critical thinking in relation to the logically possible and how poets dwell in the realm of the largest logical possibilities, and historians and scientists and so on might be constrained in other ways. They're constrained by what's factually there, either physically possible, scientifically possible, technologically possible, and so on. And if you found this helpful, give me a little thumbs up, and thanks for spending some time with the professor with the cool library.